Dear students, you would have often heard the people talking of a particular thing being in a fashion, a particular field, or of the fashion of a particular thing having been ousted from a particular sphere. Young men and women almost never tire of talking of fashion, irrespective of the place in which they are, and are always desirous of appearing the most fashionable among their friends. It is not unusual for women of a neighborhood to go stamping to buy a new sari if one of the women among them has bought a new one. Previously, the men used to wear trousers which were open at the bottom, but now they have reverted to the use of what is known in knowledgeable circles as a dram pipe. Fashion is not limited merely to the sphere of clothes, but extends to practically every field such as jewelry, modes of behavior, conversation, and thought, etc. And yet, this does not mean that the field of fashion is all-comprehending. Despite its appearing to cover a very large part of life, fashion influences a limited number of people. Its influence is felt only in those spheres concerning which we are indifferent. For example, the legs of a salwar can be either wide or narrow. And as one cannot turn to a specialist when one wants to sew a salwar as to how should its legs be fashioned, the mode in the fashion at the moment is chosen. However, usually the modes of behavior in the relationship between men and women, particularly in the case of the marital relation, are not governed by fashion because this is one of sphere in which we are not indifferent but tend to conform to some specific traditions. In this way, the sphere of fashion increases with an increase in the field of indifference. What is fashion? Dear students, there is an intimate relationship between fashion and custom, etiquette, usage, convention, and tradition. Before proceeding to describe this relationship, it would be better to know what fashion is scientifically considered. Generally, people take fashion to mean personal choice or the choice of the majority or the choice of the leading people, but such an indistinct definition cannot serve the purpose of scientific study. Hence, it must be defined more precisely. Defining fashion in his book Social Psychology, Ross writes, fashion is a series of recurring changes in the choices of a group of people which, though they may be accompanied by utility, are not determined by it. This particular definition of fashion stresses the following four facts. Fashion is a change in the choice of some group. Fashion is related to the choice of liking of a group of people. Fashion transforms this choice. For example, in India, previously the number of people who wore bush shirts was very small, but now even the most ordinary individual can be seen wearing it because its fashion has spread to every class in society. Fashion is a chain of recurring modifications. Fashion is constantly changing, and the effect of this invariable variation is that some object goes out of fashion at one particular time, but it stands a chance of being included in the fashion parade at a later date. For example, there was a time in India when the educated and literate individuals sported the buttoned-up coat. Then, for some time, this particular article of dress lost its charm and became outmoded, but now, once again, it is considered a very fashionable dress. In this way, fashion is a dynamic process. It is a series or a chain of recurring variations and changes. Fashion can be related to utility. Many fashions also have much utility. For example, the bush shirt is a very comfortable article of the gents' wardrobe, particularly in the warm climate of India. In this way, it is both fashionable and comfortable to wear bush shirt. Fashion is not determined by utility, but utility is not determinant of fashion. Many objects and articles became fashionable without having any utility whatsoever, such as ties, brooches, jewelry, etc. Nature of fashion. The nature of fashion is brought to light in some detail from the preceding analysis of the definition of fashion given by Ross. Accordingly, it was seen that the fashion causes a change in the choice of individuals. In their book Society, McLever and Page write, by fashion we mean the social approved sequence of variation on a customary theme. In this sequence, it is not essential that either our contemporaries or our predecessors must be copied and imitated. Further, it is not of essence to fashion that either the higher social classes or the lower classes must be imitated. Fashion can be any one of these. As McLever has indicated in the definition that he has given of fashion, fashion is neither a contradiction of custom nor it is outside custom. It functions in the field of custom. For example, the Indian dress is determined to a large extent by tradition and custom, but minor changes and variations in this dress are governed by fashion. Most Indian ladies wear the sari by custom, but the color, design, border, etc. of the sari are a matter of fashion and contemporary convention. The power of suggestion or the attraction that characterizes fashion are adequately explained by psychology. At the root of fashion are present two psychological but mutually contradictory desires, those of novelty, of conformity. The individual on the one hand wants to appear distinct and distinguished from the multitude, and for this he indulges in all sorts of accessories of dress, behavioral modes, conduct, mode of life, etc. While on the other hand, he resorts to the specially accepted and acceptable patterns of behavior, dress, diet, etc. in order that he may not appear different from the others and may conform to the general standards of his own class. Fashion satisfies and satiates the demand of both these desires. B. Seiper, in his essay entitled Fashion, published in the Encyclopedia of the Social Sciences, writes, the slight changes from the established norms in the dress or the other forms of behavior seem for the moment to give the victory to the individual, while the fact that one's fellows revolt in the same direction gives one a feeling of adventurous safety. In this way, fashion is the contradiction of tradition, but it itself gradually becomes the convention. Once it has become the common convention, it is in time replaced by another fashion, and thus a change occurs, and this change progresses in this manner, continuing all the time. There is an imitation in fashion, but this imitation is not one of the object, but of style, and even in imitation, every individual has his own style. In this manner, then, whereas fashion introduces an element of conformity, yet it simultaneously provides ample scope for individual nuances and idiosyncrasies. Fashion and imitation. It is certain and indisputable that imitation has an important role in fashion. Fashion spreads in society only by means of process of imitation, but what is worth thinking over is the problem of who imitates who. Psychological analysis of this human phenomenon reveals that imitation takes place according to some well-defined laws. These laws are the following. Imitation of persons on higher level. It is generally recognized that everyone wants to attain to a higher social level. Thus, everyone is usually seen imitating the habits, decorations, conduct, etc. that are recognized as fashionable in the higher groups. No one imitates the fashions belonging to a lower social level than his own class. And if he does it, he loses his social prestige and places himself open to ridicule. Imitation of the rich. In this way, then people usually imitate those richer than themselves. The middle class people who want to copy their richer people and thus win admiration and respect of the society. Imitation of the powerful. Powerful people influence everyone. The power possessed by the powerful can be of any kind, such as beauty, energy, intellect, wealth, office, etc. There is attraction in power. Hence, everyone imitates the powerful. Imitation of the leaders. In this way, the populace possesses the tendency for imitating the leaders, this tendency being particularly evident in the field of politics. Imitation of the successful. There is a saying, nothing succeeds like success. Successful people win the admiration and respect of everyone. Hence, one often comes across people who are trying to imitate them in order to appear as successful as them. Imitation of citizens. From the viewpoint of types of community life, town presents behavioral and fashion patterns to the villagers. Fashions proceed from the big cities to the smaller towns and villages. For example, the people living in Bombay and Delhi are believed to be the leader in matters of fashion. Imitation of film personalities. Nowadays, the film have a powerful influence upon the people in particularly all countries. At almost all places, it is the actors and actresses who determine fashions in matters of dress and hairstyles, etc. For example, this influence can be seen only too clearly on the younger generation in the towns of India. Social function of fashion. It is evident that the fashion is an important instrument for the social control. In the towns, most of the young people find it difficult to contradict or behave contrary to the prevailing fashion. It may or may not have any utility, but the average persons comprising a large part of the population find themselves incapable of doing anything about it and feel compelled to imitate it. Fashion is closely related to tradition and etiquette. An explanation of this relationship will also help in the elucidation of the social function of fashion. Convention and etiquette. Etiquette and convention are parts of custom. Convention is the name given to those usages concerning which most members of society are unanimous. In this way, even though not liking the lecture delivered by their teacher, the students hear in silence because that is the convention. Etiquette prescribes behavior as it should be affected on different specific occasions. The people of India, for example, join the palms of their hands in greeting each other. Influence of fashion. Fashion influences both convention and etiquette. For example, it has become the fashion for educated people, even in India, to shake hands in greeting instead of more common tradition of joined palms, with the result that the people shake hands even when greeting someone younger than them. This fashion has its reservations because people are not accustomed to shaking hands with individuals of the other sex. Similarly, when parting, people are more apt to say Tata than anything else. Many conventions have been transferred because of fashion on occasion of marriage. But even in these spheres, the effect of fashion is not quite unlimited. In fact, the effect of fashion is limited only to those spheres in which change is possible and acceptable because of cultural indifference. As has been indicated before, fashion causes changes only in the external form of language, literature, diet, clothes, art, etc., and other aspects of life, but it does not change the inner content in them. And even in the external form, its effect is limited only to the style. Extension of fashion in the modern period. In the modern period, fashion, along with the other factors of social change, has also changed. This change is evident in the form of increased rapidity of its change and the sphere of its extension. One major cause of this change is the development in the means of communication and transport, as well as an increase in the population. The result of this is that people separated by vast distances also come into contact, and thus the field in which fashion can spread is increased. For example, among the Indian citizens, one sees individuals sporting the fashion prevailing in Hollywood, London, and Paris, and one can even see some New York women wearing saris. New things come into fashion soon after they are invited and produced. Once an object has exhausted its attraction and is no longer considered fashionable, it becomes difficult to sell it, whereas an object that is the current choice of the populace sells as fast as the proverbial hot cakes. Hence, the traders and producers advertise their objects as being the essence of fashion. In this, the testimonials of the film stars are solicited. In the clothes industry, models are extensively employed in order to bring a new style into fashion, and they display them to the public. In this way, the number of men and women influenced by the fashion is constantly increasing. In the way of fashion or fashionability, it is appeal that is stressed and not utility. Many young men and women of the India can be seen imitating their Western counterparts, the primary characteristics of which are ostentation and blind imitation, being only mildly influenced by the tempering and restoring effect of logical and utilitarian thinking. Fashion in the form of social process. Fashion is a very important part of social change in its nature of a social process. Customs, habits, traditions, and conventions tend to render life stable and dull and monotonous. Fashion lends it a hue of variety and change. It makes possible major changes by continuously introducing small and insignificant changes. It begins to function in that sphere in which there is the least resistance and then continues to extend its influence to the other sphere of life. For example, the dress of the younger generation of females has even changed their moral conceptions. In this way, fashion is an important factor in the modification and transformation of the social structure. Modes of life, mutual behavior between the old and the young, conversations, etc., in addition to other aspects of life. MacLever and Page have written that the social accepted modes of action are customs of society. Customs save the individual the trouble of having the rethink everything that faces him. Otherwise, he would always be in a quandary as to how to behave on many occasions of his life. Actually, he almost never meditates upon such matters and very casually imitates the customs and thus saves himself a good bit of mental energy. These customs are generally handed over from one generation to the next. As a general rule, people accept them as the natural and the best modes of behavior and do not find any reason to violate them. In this way, customs control the behavior of the individual. Bogadas has written that customs and traditions are methods of socially accepted control that have become properly established and that are accepted and handed over from one generation to the other. Comparing custom and fashion, Kimball Young has written, if we consider custom as a stable and persistent phase of social behavior, fashion may be thought of as a variation permissible within this general acceptance. In this way, fashions are more unstable than customs and they progress by causing change in the sphere of custom. For example, it is a custom among the Indian women to wear a sari and blouse. But there are many things concerning the sari and the blouse, such as color of the sari, the style of tying it, the design of its border, the arms of the blouse, the shape of its neck, its color matching or differing from the color of the sari, etc., that are determined by fashion and not by custom. In this way, then fashion tends to increase the variety in society, whereas custom tends to hurry the society on its way to static and homogeneous condition. Then, in addition to this, there are some spheres of life in which there are no customs and the only determinant of the individual's behavior is the fashion that is prevailing. For example, art, the decoration of hair, conversation, pronunciation, etc. are some spheres in which there are no definite customs that may guide conduct. For this reason, the common individual imitates the fashion in these fields. Further, the changes that take place in these spheres also occur comparatively faster than in the other spheres. While on the one hand, custom has the advantage of saving the individual a lot of mental exercise by obviating the necessity of thinking originally on every problem. It, on the other hand, also satisfies the sense of self-expression of the individual. It is of course not inevitable that fashion has some utility. It is sometimes adopted by the individual in order that he may appear distinct from the crowd and may become the cynosure of all eyes. Distinguishing between custom and fashion, Trade has written that the fashion is the imitation of the contemporaries, whereas custom is the imitation of the ancestors. Customs proceed through the ages, and the person who upholds customs and tradition acts as those who have acted before him. On the other hand, the fashionable men and women do just what has not been done before, but they resort to doing what is being done all around them in order to appear the most up-to-date and latest in their dress, mode of life, behavior, etc. The rapid change that is discernible in the young men and women of India today in matters of dress is the outcome of the custom but of fashion. In the words of Rose, if we figure the life of a society as a flowing stream, then we think of one custom as down imitation, the other fashion as cross imitation. This statement by Rose also points to the same fact that has been mentioned before, namely that custom is the imitation of ancestors, their thoughts and activities, whereas fashion is the imitation of contemporary thoughts and actions. The difference between custom and fashion that has been described before is further clarified in the following table. Conclusion. Fashion is a term commonly used to describe a style of clothing. A fashion usually remains popular for about 1 to 3 years and then is replaced by yet another fashion. In any era, fashion is a reflection of times and what is going on socially and economically. India is a country with diversified customs and cultures. People following various traditions live here. Their way of dressing also differ from each other. The traces of Indians being fashionable can be found out from the ancient remains of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro civilizations. After the independence, globalization is being witnessed in Indian fashion industry, due to which changes have occurred in the style of Indian dressing. Styles of wearing saris and salwar kameez have changed. The look is more compilation than region specific. Different styles of blouses like katori style, halter neck, back button blouses, high neck blouses, puffed sleeve blouses, etc. have become the hot favorite among women. The average lengths of the blouses have decreased. Saris are draped mostly in traditional back pallu style or Gujarati style. Indian fashion scene is greatly influenced by its films. For example, Mumtaz style sari draping inspired by Easter year heroine Mumtaz. Here, sari is tightly draped around the body. As far as the salwar kameez is concerned, numerous styles and patterns can be given to this garment. For instance, the kameez can be long, short, lean, skin tight, etc. Such variations can be done to salwar as well as dupattas. Modern version of kameez is known as kurti. It could be coupled with jeans, pants or churidar. It has taken the form of Indo-Western outfit. People in Western countries too have started wearing kurtis.